I'm always humbled by these sorts of invitations because maybe I'll ask your opinion at the end of my little spiel here. I don't think my life is all that interesting. So the thought of sitting here and telling you all my stories is a little humbling and off-putting. But I'm hoping that perhaps by the end of my story here, we will all see that there are some generalizable points that in my life that perhaps we can all talk about. Maybe your life shares some of these points. I was talking to somebody here about how I think one's research interests have to come from someplace deep inside. And so as I impose a narrative on my life, and I think about my life, at least in part, as my research interests, I start back to where I was born. I am an American citizen, but I was born in Germany. And that's only important because I had an opportunity as a 13-year-old to go back and visit German family. And perhaps at 13, everything is formative, but that experience for me was formative because as I traveled around as a young American Catholic girl, this was, I'll tell you, it was 1963, I was captivated by European churches, by the statues. I'm a medieval historian, jumping ahead a little bit in the story. And what has always captivated me are the religious questions. Why do people believe what they believe? Why do they build the churches that they build and the statues that they construct? So the fact that there I was wandering around in my own homeland, visiting my family at 13, probably now as I look back had something to do with the formation of my interests. My family came to the United States when I was a very little girl, and my father got transferred to the Midwest. That's important to me because after 28 years in Boston, I still claim to be a foreigner. I'm from the Midwest, which I know for some of you perhaps, only maybe a few of you here perhaps, starts at 128. I grew up in northeastern Ohio, which I never thought of as the Midwest until I came here and discovered that anything west of 128 is the Midwest. But it was a good place to grow up. Everyone was from somewhere else. And you know, one of the significant differences between that place and Boston is that religion and ethnicity was not an important part of our identity. It was within your own home. But once you were out on the street, in school, we didn't think as people in Boston do about what neighborhood you came from, what your last name was, what religion you obviously are, whether you were Irish or Italian. We were just people who mostly came from some other place. I went to the I went Catholic schools all the way through. Have some of those same stories about the nuns that are caricatures of stories about the nuns, but I also am very fortunate to have been taught by some extraordinarily gifted women who, as much as my parents and anything else in my life, have a great deal to do with any success I have had. Some of the religious women who were my teachers and mentors in grade school and especially in high school were extraordinary women. And then I had all those crazy nuns in addition. I went to a Jesuit college, and I think the fact that I am still in a Jesuit college has something to do with the fact that I was so impressed with the Jesuit purposes for education, the Jesuit identity of an academic institution, that I chose a Jesuit institution as a place to be an undergrad. I went to school long before most of the people here in the room, before students, as our students all do, did the tour. We didn't do a tour when I was a high school senior. We just picked a place or several places that we thought we could afford and get into and applied. I grew up in Ohio. I decided I didn't want to be an undergraduate in Ohio. I wanted to go 1 or 2 states over. I wanted a Jesuit institution. I chose the University of Detroit. Never saw it. Went the first day and discovered, not so much to my chagrin, but to my parents' chagrin, that the University of Detroit is a pretty gritty place. Then, in 1968, it was very close to the area where the riots had just been in the city of Detroit. It was a pretty gritty urban neighborhood, and that was a wonderful place to be an undergraduate because not only did I have a great educational experience, but I had the great advantage of being in a city, in a neighborhood where the students at U of D were the only white people around, When I was on a bus, I was often the only white person on the bus. When I had my hair cut, I was the only white customer they had. That was a great formative experience for me as an undergraduate, because I got a little taste, I don't pretend that it was a huge taste, a little taste of what it's like to be the only one. I started as an English major. I was going to write the great American novel. It only occurred to me gradually that I didn't have the talent to write the great American novel. But I did a Chaucer course as an undergrad and fell in love. Not so much with the black and white imagery and all the things that my English professor wanted me to see, but with the people. They are so interesting, those 14th century characters in the Canterbury Tales. And I left the classroom thinking, was everybody like that in the 14th century? Aren't they interesting? I found a couple of gifted faculty members who were also interested in the Middle Ages who persuaded me that I could make a career in medieval studies. So I went to graduate school at the University of Toronto, which had a very strong program in medieval studies. There were 125 doctoral students in medieval studies in my program. Toronto, U of T is a huge 60,000 student institution, 15,000 graduate students, so it's probably not surprising that there were 125 students in medieval studies, but there we were. All learning from one another. It was a great experience because it was studies. There were students focusing on literature and art and law and philosophy and theology, and I focused in history, but I had plenty of people to talk to who knew more about literature than I did, or theology than I did, or philosophy than I did. I was still always interested in the religious questions, so my dissertation was on the conversion period in early medieval history. What made pagan Germanic tribes decide that Christianity was the preferable religion and convert, and what was their experience of Christianity like? I had the advantage then of, when I was on the job market, finally finished my dissertation. When I was on the job market, I could look in both the religion area and also the history area, which meant that I was applying for jobs in seminaries, but I was also applying for jobs in history departments. In 1979, when I finished my PhD, there weren't too many jobs in the humanities. That's not an uncommon experience. There are never too many jobs in the humanities. I had the good fortune, though, of actually having a choice. I could go to the University of Florida at Gainesville and teach Western Civ, or I could come to Boston College and teach in the theology department. Now, I'm Catholic, raised Catholic, pre-Vatican II, actually, for most of my life. But I was a little concerned about coming as a woman to a theology department. It wasn't religious studies, and is to this day not religious studies. It's theology, and it remains theology for a reason. But it was a little frightening to me. All I knew about the theology department at Boston College was that Mary Daly was a faculty member in the theology department at Boston College. That may not mean anything to some of you. She's right now an esteemed elderly radical feminist. In those days, still in the late 70s, she had just finished The Church and the Second Sex, which is an extremely important book for lots of Catholic feminists. She looked, in the same way Betty Friedan said, whoa, our experience as women is different. Mary Daly said, whoa, our experience as Catholic women is different. We are a second sex in the church. But because I was so nervous about meeting Mary Daly at my interview that I read The Church and the Second Sex carefully before my interview. Of course, Mary already by 1979 wasn't taking much part in business in the theology department, so I didn't meet her during my interview, which went well. I came and had a wonderful time teaching theology core, teaching graduate students in theology, having the great good fortune to be able to teach medieval church history to gifted students, which I did for a number of years quite happily. By the mid-'80s, in the mid-'80s, Bill Neenan, a Jesuit who was the dean, asked me to become an administrator. I had been on a lot of committees. I had had the privilege of serving on university-wide committees, so I got a taste of what university life was. So in the mid-'80s, I became dean for freshmen in the College of Arts and Sciences. After a few years of that, I was associate dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. And coming from full-time teaching in a department to academic administration was an interesting transition, but one that I look back on and think it was the right one. I liked being of help to students, which one can do as a dean. I liked thinking about the university as a university rather than a discipline and the teaching of a discipline. I don't miss all those blue books that one is surrounded by with full-time teaching. So I've enjoyed administration since the mid-'80s when I began it. In '99, the then academic vice president asked if I would come and become an associate academic vice president, which I eagerly did. And so since '99, I have been associate academic vice president and now vice provost, same job, just different title, in more central administration. It's good work. My purview now is faculties. As Katie said, I'm a vice provost for faculties, which means that faculty welfare is my primary pursuit. I work with the schools in the hiring of faculty, the retention of faculty, the salary adjustments, rewards for faculty, any faculty grants and faculty awards, research endeavors. Whatever has to do with faculty is my job, all the way through faculty retirement. I like doing this at a Jesuit Catholic institution. I've been in Jesuit institutions, as you've just heard, all my life. The Jesuit brand of Catholic education is very attractive to me, and I think, frankly, I'm as good of an emissary, an ambassador, a spokesperson for the Jesuit institution and for the Jesuit tradition as many Jesuits. The Jesuit understanding of the Catholic affirmation of the world, the Catholic affirmation of the use of reason, the Catholic understanding of academic freedom, the Jesuit twist on that is very attractive to me. And so it's been a privilege for me to be a spokesperson for Catholic institutions and particularly this Jesuit institution. We need more women as spokespeople for the Jesuit Catholic tradition and this Jesuit Catholic university. I don't think, frankly, that we're doing as good a job as we should in hiring affirmatively for women, especially in central administration. And I hope that all of you will help me in trying to hold our feet to the fire on that issue, because it's important that we have women in visible positions so that this community and all communities can see that women especially have a place in a Jesuit Catholic institution and in a leadership.